Frye families. My name is Lynn. Thank you for joining me for another Frye families activity. I hope you had a chance to check out Seattle-based artist Leo Berg's sculpture, Wind Jangle, in the Frye's collection from a different video. Taking inspirations from it, let's make a wind chime. While this activity is appropriate for children ages 3 and up, please note that the younger the children, the more assistance they will need from an adult with cutting, using the oven, and assembling. Let's look at the materials that we will need for today. To create a wind chime, here are the materials that you will need. First of all, you will need quite a few of these number 6 plastic containers. You can check on the container itself to make sure that it says number 6 inside of this triangle here. That way we know that's the right plastic that we need. You also need a pair of scissors, a hole puncher, some Sharpie markers or other oil-based markers, some thread. This is similar to like a fishing wire, or you can use a thread or yarn if you have those at home. And lastly, you will need some kind of base. So this can be a toilet paper roll, a cup, to hold your pieces together to create your wind chime. We'll be using the plastic container to create the pieces for our wind chime. First, you want to cut out the flat surface from the containers. Make sure they're clean, free of grease. I like to use baking soda to give them a really good scrub if they still feel sticky after cleaning them. So cut out the flat surface as large as possible. We'll be putting these into the oven to bake later. And once they're in the oven, they will shrink down to a smaller size. So you really want to make sure you have plenty of surface to work with. Once you have these flat pieces cut out, go ahead and create a design on them. You can make a drawing of an animal or maybe an abstract design. So I'm just going to make kind of an abstract design, maybe inspired by a flower with these circular lines and shapes. And you may notice that I am making my drawing as large as possible. And it's the same reason I said earlier, that because we'll be baking these in the oven, that they will shrink down. So try to make it as large as the flat surface. And I wouldn't worry too much about the details, because once we bake them, the details won't really matter. They won't show up as much. So here I have a few more pieces that I worked on earlier. Once you have your finished drawing, you can go ahead and trim the edges. We're going to go ahead and trim off these extra part around the edge to kind of round out the edge a little bit. Really want to make sure my edge is smooth so it doesn't feel sharp or pointy when I touch them. Once you trim the edge, you want to use your hole puncher. Find a spot kind of far away from the edge and give it a punch. Once your pieces are trimmed, make sure some of these pieces are hole punched on the two opposite ends of it. Then we're going to line them up in a baking tray. Make sure your baking tray is lined with the parchment paper or aluminum foil. Then we'll put them in the oven at 350 degrees for about a minute or 2, depending on the oven. I will be using a toaster oven. I pull my pieces out of the oven in a little less than a minute, just because I like the way they're curled up, making them look more interesting that way. But if you leave it in the oven a little longer, it will flatten out like this one here. Notice how they shrink down a lot. Come from a size like this to a size like this. It's about a 1/10 of it. Isn't that interesting? Once you have a few pieces made, then you're ready to assemble your wind chime. To assemble our wind chime, I will be using a plastic lid from my blueberry container as the base. I like how this one has holes on here already, so I don't need to punch more holes. I'm just gonna add some decoration on here to make it look more interesting with my Sharpie marker that I've been using. Then I'm going to cut up some thread and put it through some of these pieces. Cutting off a piece of thread. Maybe I'll use this one here. I'm going to thread it through the hole that we punched earlier. And before we tie it off, we're going to put it through one of these holes on my base and tie a knot. Just making a double knot. Should be sufficient for the thread that I'm using. If you have beads and other fun things, feel free to add it to your wind chime. So now I have one piece made. I'm going to keep going to put my wind chime together. So I have assembled all the smaller pieces together underneath this larger base. Hear that sound? This actually sounds pretty nice. One last thing I'm going to do is to add a string so I can hang it. And there's no science to this. Depending on your base, you might want to attach it differently than I am here. But I'm just going to thread my thread through a hole, go to the opposite end, make sure that it's balanced when I hang it. Then I'm gonna tie the two ends together. Just a screw knot should be enough. And now I have a wind chime. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this activity, and I will see you soon.